Welcome to East Meets West, and today, as usual, I always pick people who can add value. And I have with us today another John Maxwell coach, somebody who's very influential, and she's going to tell us about a topic today that I think every single person on this planet is struggling with, and maybe not everyone. Some people in this profile, like a D, is okay in having disagreement and have that kind of conversation, but not everybody is okay with having disagreement. So today our topic is about the wedge of disagreement, and it's coming from Anna's book that she's going to talk today about, and we're going to discuss a little bit of this, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of value. So who is Anna? Ana Sasmiresan. I hope I pronounce your name correctly.
It
She's gonna,
is. Thank you.
yeah, so she's a leadership strategist and an author, a powerful framework that she has developed for help leaders transform tension into value, innovation, and alignment. So through her work, she challenges the traditional view of dissent as conflict and reframes it as a valuable data insight that sharpens decisions and strengthens teams. Her methodology equips leaders to intentionally design for dissent rather than avoid it, creating cultures where truth can be spoken and leveraged. Whether through her upcoming book, certification, or live experiences, Anna invites team to apply the wedge of disagreement, inserting intentional tension to spark active transformation. So, and this is because when disagreement is held well, it doesn't divide. It drives better outcomes. And I love that. I am so looking forward to hearing about this book here. And I will be getting this book, and Anna will tell us how we can get this book of the wedge of disagreement. And how can we turn those agreements, into win-win situation as she's going to share with us. So Anna, before we get into this exciting topic, I would like to know if there's anything. I know I haven't read much about your bio there, but tell us a little bit about yourself before we get talking here.
Thank you, Shanti. Thank you. Wow, I'm super excited to talk about this subject with you, and I hope your audience, your listeners, will find value. About myself, I spent 20 plus years in the corporate world, and what that experience has taught me, but besides the fact that I've had an amazing career, but what that experience has taught me is that we lead for compliance and for conformity, and we don't always activate the potential on our teams. And at the end of that career, as I stepped into entrepreneurship and looked at building a business that grows leaders, I realized that this is actually such an important subject that I was motivated to write a book about it. So, in the end, I spent 20 years in corporate. I've seen firsthand how people develop in that environment, and I've also seen how many people don't. And those people that don't, I believe God had given them so much potential, dreams and skills and talents, and a purpose. And the wedge of disagreement is just a way in which to activate strategically at the core every human being on our team, in groups, in communities, and even in families, because we don't disagree well everywhere.
That is true. For this past week, I think of how many times I had disagreement conversation, and I don't think some went well at all.
hmm
Uh,
hmm
so you talking about this, I would think, you know, because like from my perspective, these are conversations that we're having, in the boardroom, out of the boardroom, customers, all areas, families. We're having these kind of conversation. Maybe why you decided to write about disagreement?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Um, because I think that in most environments, people think of disagreement like a fire that they need to extinguish. So it's an emotional, a dramatic experience. As soon as we disagree, we go on guard and we try to figure out how quickly can we return this group to harmony. And we feel like, well, when we do that, we led well, right? And we pat ourselves on the back and how we created alignment. Everyone is agreeing, we're great, we're a great team. However, what if I told you that that speed to alignment, that speed to returning groups to harmony actually is costing companies millions in dollars in innovation, in lack of innovation, in disruption perspective, and just really being able to activate people to contribute to the organization more fully. Because when we rush out of disagreement, a lot of people quiet themselves. A lot of people edit their own story, their own perspectives that could add a lot of value. And I do want to say that there are times in the crisis when we can just take a decision, move teams forward through the crisis, and afterwards have a conversation about, hey, this is why we didn't discuss it. This was an emergency. But I believe that most of the times we should lead with what I call productive tension, which is an environment where an idea can be filtered and improved and elevated by poking holes at the idea with as many different perspectives as possible. And so what I am hoping to do is to turn this perception that disagreement is dramatic and it's conflict into data, its value. If we disagree, what if we turn this anxiety of conflict and tension that we experience into excitement and say, oh my gosh, we're disagreeing right now. We're just about to learn something new. We're not conforming to our existing thoughts, processes, and methods. We're saying, let's challenge this idea. Let's challenge this environment. Let's figure out what are all the possible perspectives we could gather in order to arrive not at a situation where the leader has the best idea, but that the leader finds the best solution for whatever the problem is. And that's why I wanted to write this book, because I believe that disagreement is something that is actually managed in our life from a very young age, right? We are told as kids not to disagree. We are told that people will not appreciate when we disagree, that they will think that we are disruptive or whatever. Business and corporate environments, education, is all built from a point of conformity. And I'm not saying let's rebel. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is let's hear each other out. Maybe in the process of that, we can come up with something so incredibly valuable, because I believe that transformation and buy-in doesn't happen if we all see eye to eye. I believe it happens if we feel heard. That's all it takes. If we feel heard, even if the ultimate decision isn't exactly our idea, we are okay to get behind it with passion and commitment, simply because we felt what we said mattered and we were heard. We had a space, we matter. That's why I'm writing this book. And really, the strategic activation coaching certification and all the programs, the speaking engagements, they're all rooted in this idea that everybody has a whole lot more to say and give than they are allowed to give today in this environment.
That is true. I do know of a lot of S's personality, and I'm talking about DISC personality. I've been doing some training on that, so that's on my mind right now. But I think honestly, sometimes I relate that same tension there with the S personality, who just want harmony and want peace and would avoid any conflict at all costs. So, they would easily shut down and a whole lot of things that happen. And when you are leading a team, that you do need to understand it's okay to have some healthy conflict, right? And as you said, can we argue and be okay in poking holes into one another's ideas. And the reason is not to try to be difficult. I would think if your intention is just trying to be difficult and showing up in that angle, that was your intention, well then this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about finding the best solution based on what's the situation. So
Yeah.
Anna, tell us about this tension. What are good looks like, and what does a bad tension looks like?
Well, I don't think there's bad tension. I think tension is hard, but it doesn't have to be bad. So we need to learn the skill of building tension. In the book and in the certification program, we call that stay in the tension. Stay in the tension long enough in order to arrive to a whole other level of ideation. I believe Simon Sinek said that that you had collaborated enough, that it's a true collaboration when an idea can no longer be traced back to one person. It is a collaborative idea. And John Maxwell also talks about group thinking and the value, the incredible value of that. So the wedge of disagreement, it really builds on those concepts in a different way by creating a space when we enter conflict and it gets heated. We need to build the skills to say, hey guys, for 10, 15 minutes, let's all agree to disagree and gather everyone's perspectives. But of course, we need to be able to instill some rules. And we have to have these beliefs about people as leaders and team members. And as leaders, we need to model these beliefs, because if we model these beliefs, then the team members will also adopt them. And what are those beliefs? The first belief is that people are valuable and that every person should have a voice at the table. If we have gone through the trouble of hiring all these team members, why not give them a voice? Why not allow them to fully contribute, right? Not just within the process and the clicks and the widgets that we measure at work, but in the ideation process. And so in the wedge of disagreement, we limit a frame of time and we say, for the next 10 minutes or for the next 20 minutes, let's share all the opposing ideas we can. It doesn't matter who we are opposing the ideas with. Let's share them. Let's write them down. Let's evaluate them. Make sure we keep respect so we stay relationally strong as a team. We're not attacking each other or calling each other names. We're basically saying, I don't agree with you. This is what I think. So we are learning the skills to create safer spaces to disagree and to activate creativity. Now, you see, this is going to take some time because today people have what I call PTLD. Have you heard of that? PTLD? It's called post-traumatic leadership damage. Post-traumatic leadership damage. So people have PTLD today that they have to overcome. What is PTLD? When they spoke up against the opinion of a leader, they got in trouble, right? And there's actually a research, 2024-2025 research by HRD America. It's called the employee, wow, I forget the name of it. Anyways, let me give you the data. The data says that 74% of people change what they want to say, edit what they want to say, so they don't contradict their leader. They don't even say what they want to say. They already understand what their leader opinion is. And because it's not safe or it's not perceived to be safe, when they share their opinion, they change what they want to say. So they're altering themselves before they even start. And they're editing their narrative because we are not creating safe spaces. And in the same report, it actually says that 68% of people don't share anything at all when the opinion contradicts the leader. Okay, so that's huge. That's huge. Think about that. 7 in 10 people that we work with side by side we don't even know what they think. We don't even know what ideas they have because we haven't created the space to share. So what happens? What do you think happens? What happens to you if you hold back? What do you think?
I think for one, I can come out of there not feeling heard. I might even have the best idea, and I will just go along with whatever was said.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
maybe cost the company even more too.
correct. That is exactly what happens when you hold back because you perceive it's not safe. The best idea might not be shared. You disengage clearly,
Yeah.
right? Because you feel a certain way, and then you don't contribute to your maths. And the more of this happens, the more we get from where we wish we could speak all the way back to toxic silence, where it's truly unsafe to speak. The more we edit ourselves. And while this is incredibly sad to be experienced within companies, just imagine what happens with that human being when they go home in life, right? They don't feel valued. They don't feel like it was worthy of them to share their opinion. They're sad, they're hurt. So it doesn't just affect our productivity at work, it actually affects how we live. And it affects how we treat our families. Do we make spaces for them? Well, we know for sure that if team members are heard at work, if the leaders are more open to listening and actually considering them at work, those people go home and they allow their families more space and they hear their kids, they hear their spouses. There's more engagement and involvement. So there's a direct and a collateral impact for why this matters so much.
I can see that. As a psychological aspect of this too, what goes down when, you're not able to speak up, how that also affects you in your other conversation. That's interesting that you're bringing that out. It makes me wonder here, two things that are coming to mind. How does the leader get buy-in and commitment from the team especially when the idea that the team who wants to be heard, yes, and I'm speaking on behalf of some of the leaders too who might be thinking in this angle, and to hear your thoughts on this. Everybody have an opinion, and not always that opinion or the idea can work. Now, to let somebody know that this can't work, but to do it in such a way that they feel good still, that they've been heard. And that individual, because there's so many high emotional people that if their ideas are not accepted, they take it in a different way. Oh, you can't talk anything here. You're always maybe it's either the leader or whoever decision maker way or no way or nothing would ever be good enough for them because your idea didn't fly. And so I want maybe if you could talk into that, how do you make it safe that they're being heard, but at the same time understand that idea might not work right now. And not that we don't appreciate your idea, is that it can't work, but not to say that you will shut down and don't ever bring back any other idea.
Yeah,
You
sure.
understand the scenario here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's definitely a skill to do this. And that's why in our corporate and company programs, we assess the leadership capacity for strategic activation coaching is what we call this. And when I say we, the strategic activation coaching certification started this year, and we have currently 7 global leaders in the founding members cohort going through the program and starting to learn the program. And so these particular leaders are able to take this content into their companies first and experience with the tension model, with the stay in the tension coaching, with the wedge of disagreement, creating the safe space for the wedge, with a time limit as well, right? Because we don't have the luxury of speaking for hours about people's opinions. We have to know how to manage time for effectiveness. There's a series of tools that leaders can learn to deploy in their coaching process in order to be able to, first of all, activate the team, because when they first start, people are not just going to all of a sudden feel safe and share, especially if their current environment is completely different on the opposite side. So it does take some warming up, and there are some steps to do that. And when it comes to the ultimate decision, what we have experienced so far when we take this into companies is that actually people get emotional, not because their idea isn't selected, but people get emotional because they were finally invited to speak. And they are not so connected to what they shared as they are more connected to the team environment created, the creativity, the imagination that sparked. In a true environment, let's just give an example and say we have 10 team members and we are dealing with a particular problem. We're activating a wedge. 10 team members share their opinion. At the end of that wedge, usually most team members' opinion is already shifting because they heard everybody. So it's not just that the leader needs to hear them. They need to hear each other. My opinion may be X, yours is Y, and the next person is Z. And as we are truly invested into creating space for this and into honoring each other, right? Like listening to each other, then as we are starting to shift our opinion a little bit because we see, oh, what you said, I didn't think about, oh, I didn't have that data point. Or, oh, yeah, you know what, from where I'm sitting, I didn't have that experience. So teams lead, we call this lead the shift. They lead the shift together because they are willing to have the conversation. So it's about starting with a leader, learning the skill of activation, and ultimately it's about building a fully activated team where they care. Hey, Shanti, what do you think? You know what? Share truly what you think. Don't worry about if I agree with it or not. Let me fully understand it. Let's figure out how to do this together. I mean, I believe that disagreement is the main tool for collaboration, right? If you think about it, and you talked about DISC, it's not good to collaborate as a team. Let's say we have all C's and S's on the team. We all agree, we're all C's and S's. We're not going to get much done. We're going to get some stuff done. But is it really going to be as good as if we have D, I, S, and C's? Now, when we have all the styles, it's harder. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that we have more perspectives. We have a different problem-solving posture because we can see things from different personality styles. Similarly, in the wedge of disagreement, perspective comes from experience that we have in life, how we grew up, our hardest times, our best times, what we saw in others, how we were led, how we were subjected to bad leadership, whatever there might be. So similarly to how we teach teams to collaborate together within the DISC styles, we actually can teach teams to collaborate together within the wedge of disagreement. Because what happens here is appreciation for perspective, not pure ideation. It's appreciation for perspective. It's if this failed, why would it fail? Can we think about it now? Oh my gosh, if we think about it, we will have less failure because we had adjusted in the front end. There's a lot of techniques within the model that really helps leaders and teams get to their best self through activation. It's a lot of fun.
And so what would you say that, as to be a good strategic activator, as you said, what do, these activators needs to believe about people?
I think I started to say that and then I shifted. So first, that everyone is valuable and that they have skills and talents that they can contribute with. Second, that everyone does want to succeed, okay? That they don't come to work to fail. If they fail, it's something that maybe can be solved, right? Third, that everyone really does need to have a voice and that we make space for it. And what I've learned so far in the strategic activation coaching, and this actually seems to be the hardest one, because the more opinionated people, whether they're leaders or team members, they always speak first. And if they speak first, the ones that are maybe more introverted, they sit on the sideline and then they don't want to rock the boat. So it's about really creating space for everyone to share. The other one that is really, really important is to really understand that success is a team sport. It's a team sport to succeed. Even as solopreneurs and entrepreneurs or big companies, if we want to build big business, we need teams, we need support, and we need to figure out how to collaborate together. And I think ultimately is to be able to really honor the person. Maybe Sue, let's say Sue is a person, she had 10 great ideas. We want to make sure that we're not favoring Sue now, right? Well, Sue is the only one with the good ideas. No, let's fully activate people. Let's get people in. Let's honor their brain, activate their creativity, allow them to have imagination. And if they say silly things, don't laugh at them. Because when we do them, we make a few steps back, right? In the safe zone of sharing our perspective. So it's really about believing in the human spirit and being able to create an environment at work where every single person doesn't just belong, they matter.
Well put. So, I do know all of this here is not something easy. It takes work and it takes time to be intentional with your team. And I do know with, the way the world is going, everybody's so busy and it's very fast paced. And you might jump into a meeting and you want a decision, you want stuff to be moving fast too. And sometimes you're on a deadline to make a decision and you want to do all these things. And time doesn't permit because the opportunity will not wait on you all to dissect, review, argue, come up. And so sometimes you're in such a crunch to make decisions. What would you advise a leader in those times?
Yeah, that's a great perspective. However, what I think is that with people, fast is slow and slow is fast. Okay, like with people, for example, if we try, and this isn't my saying, someone said this, by the way, so I don't want to take credit. I don't know who said it. It's a quote. But with people, let's say that we have big transformation, right? We want to change, we want to move in another direction. If we don't do strategic activation, what happens is we're going to return to the same conversation over and over and over. And adoption is low. And we're frustrated with why don't people adopt? Why don't people believe? Why don't people do? It's like we really have to sit back and decide what's a crisis situation and what's a self-imposed short deadline that we're self-imposing this deadline. But if we don't create full buy-in, it doesn't matter that our deadline is by the end of the month. The team isn't adopting what we want anyways. So we're going to come back to this conversation in May and in June and in July and in August. And by the end of the year, we'll be like, oh my God, we are so far away from our implementation target. We're surprised that we're not as successful in this new whatever. So we have to differentiate between crisis, when we have to be authoritative and take decision, move teams forward. And even then, we can be kind, okay? We can tell people, hey, listen, right now, we don't have time to discuss this subject. Let's do this. I honor you guys. We can come back later and talk about why I decided this, but right now we need to move fast. If we have relational strength, that kind of conversation goes a long way. But if we have time, let's not self-impose tight deadlines that discard people's opinions and buying process. Because remember, I believe that in the Persaud program, it says change is personal first. Right? So if I want to create change at scale, let's say I have 1,000 people on my team, The only way to create optimal change is to change every single person in the team. If 1,000 people change what they do because they believe in it, the organization will change, and it will change quickly. Very similar to this. If we believe as an organization that our people are smart, that they have great ideas, that we as leaders do not have to have all the answers. In fact, we should believe that we don't have the best ideas, that probably the best ideas can be harvested from the group. Then we actually can activate the wedge and move quickly, because we don't need to sit in the wedge for days. We can manage how we harvest perspective and how we move forward. We can do it in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, in a half an hour, depending on the size of the group. But it's really about honoring the process and making, like I said, the difference between, is it crisis? Do we need to do it right now? Or are we self-imposing crisis, but we're then going to have lower results?
I like that. So indeed, I do agree that, it should not be that all the time you're always in crisis mode. Something is wrong there too. Right?
Correct.
So indeed, you need to look at, when is time for that. And as you said, if you have enough trust in the team and the team trust into you, then when you have situation like this here, they'll be able to understand why we're going in this angle here now and why we're not brainstorming it. And I've seen this in many organizations that, where team feel that they're not heard, that decisions are made and they weren't even asked the opinion. And they're the front line, they're the people who are actually doing the work, who have the understanding of what struggles they're faced, but yet the senior level will just impose something without taking into consideration what they're facing. And so I hear you, and as leaders, we do need to look at, are we hearing our people? And then I would add that our people also need to be at a emotional intelligent level to understand sometimes things will happen in a way that has to go faster and might not be at your pace that you would like it to go to. So, and I'm seeing this play out with so many teams, that their decisions, the company have timelines to meet certain things, but people want to prolong things. So instead of getting it done within 30 days, it's taking 90 days. And it costs company too. And so something you have to have those hard conversations with people. This is where disagreements start happening, the tensions start building. And yes, as you said, it will eventually lead to a disengaged person. And so
You said something. I want to catch on something you said. You said brainstorm. In the Wedge disagreement, we don't talk about brainstorm necessarily. We talk about harvesting. Because brainstorm is like the beginning of the ideation process where we are actually inventing. What we are trying to do in the Wedge of disagreement is harvest perspective. You already know what you think. What is it? Right? So the harvesting process is a lot faster. Brainstorming is like growing a tree. Okay, so we're like, okay, it's gonna take some time. We have to brainstorm this idea. We go to ideation, we try it out. It's like a lot of this stuff, right? Harvesting is like, when is the apple? When are the apple ready? We need to go get the apple, right? So the apples are ready, we go harvest. So we're not starting in the brainstorming process with a completely foreign subject. We're not going into R&D. We're not going into ideation that way. We're going into active solutioning where we're harvesting perspective. So it's quick. It actually is really quick, especially if it's safe. If it's safe and people feel like I can just share what I think, and even if it's not the right thing, it won't matter. But we have to be really careful with three things. One is most companies, not most companies, that's too much to say. A lot of companies and a lot of teams operate in toxic silence. And in toxic silence, teams are completely disengaged. It is what I call brainless teams. because in toxic silence, they are not allowed to think, right? It's those environments where managers sometimes say, I didn't hire you to think, right? And it's so sad, but there are teams like that. In toxic silence, you have to tell smart people what to do every day, which is crazy, right? So if there are listeners right now who are thinking of their team and they're frustrated because their teams are just not taking initiative, they're not moving forward, and they have to tell every single person what to do, when to do it, how to do it, why to do it, that means that is a sign that they are leading in toxic silence. So they're not activating the team as well. The team is completely brainless. They are just kind of like floating, you know? Then we have what I call surface insight, which is really the most dangerous, because in the surface insight, we start the wedge, we start asking questions, we start harvesting some ideas, but then we stop. So the team feels almost strict. They feel like, well, you said it was safe, and now we stopped, and now you're not doing anything with my ideas. Or even worse, tomorrow, as a leader, that person comes back to the team member and says, I can't believe you said that. Right? Where you started a wedge and you said it's safe, and now the next day you reprimand the person. Now, that is actually an area where companies will experience the highest amount of turnover, and it's just not a good environment. And we know this, right? We know environments like this. I know I have seen teams and I have seen companies where this happens often, and it's sad. And so people, of course, now they go now into toxic silence because they don't want to share anything. It wasn't safe. Not only that they were tricked by saying it was safe, they got in trouble the next day for what they said, right? And then the third one is, it's like occasional insight. It's like, we don't do this really well, but every once in a while, like, the leader has all the ideas all the time. Every once in a while, a team member brings up something and they say, oh, that's a good idea. Let's do that one. It's what I call luck leadership. Every once in a while, like, we can't actually repeat the process. We cannot duplicate this, brilliant idea, because it just happened by luck. And that day, that leader said, okay, you know what? Your idea is good. But what we want is to take these 3 levels all the way to strategic activation, where we create the space. And it's a process. We are not looking for teams and for leaders to do this in one session. It's a skill. That's why the book will be important. That's why the strategic activation coaching process is important. It's a skill. It's really elevating leaders to learn coaching skills, but within this framework.
Wonderful. So Anna, before I ask you to tell us how we can get your book, and maybe even those who would like to join your session to build the skills that is needed to have these kind of disagreement, and I would say more, how do you lead better? Is there anything else about this book you would like to tell us?
Well, this book it's been an interesting journey for me. And what I realized as I'm writing this book, it's almost ready. It's coming out in September. And as I've created the coaching certification, I realized one very bold thing. And that is that I believe I was born to disagree. And that I believe you were too. I believe that we have been given life experiences that build varied perspectives that disagree in a way that I think of disagreement, not just dramatize, but operationalize disagreement. Think about it as data. And so I grew up in communism until I was 11 in Eastern Europe. That is a certain kind of perspective that has stayed with me, and it's my authority to have that story weaved within this book. And why is this important? Because not everybody grew up like that. And I do remember even though I was young. I remember the struggles. I remember the fear in the people. I remember there was no food. I remember abuse. I will never forget that. And whenever a problem or a situation is presented, that's a perspective I can bring to the situation. Now, when I was 11, Romania, where I grew up, became a democratic republic after a revolution. And we were talking, my friends and I, we were talking like, what does this mean? You know, what are we doing? Our parents had no clue. Our parents had grown up and lived their entire life in communism. They had no clue what to tell us to do, what not to do, how to experience this next phase. So we figured it out. But you know, that figuring out is another perspective. And that perspective creates a whole other dynamic on situations, problems, and ideas. When I was 22, I came to the US. I figured out how to be an immigrant, how to live a life, how to build a life, how to build a career. It was hard and fun and all these things. Divorce, bankruptcy, the whole thing. Like it has not been easy. But what it is, it's another perspective. How can I be so agreeable in the world when I have had such diverse backgrounds and so many stories and experience in my life that give me all these perspectives of situations? And so one thing that I want to leave the listeners with is that I want them to go back and harvest their own true perspectives and understand how their life stories, how their career stories have actually enriched them with ideas in order to build productive disagreement and to be able to have better conversations. Get excited when someone disagrees with you. Try to find out how did they come up with an idea that's opposed to yours. What was that process? How fun is that? I mean, we could be mad or we could have fun. Why not have fun? Be optimistic. And so I think that is the main message that I want to leave people with. And that if we are able to harvest our perspectives, our own and then that of many people, we could be a lot more disruptive in business, a lot more dynamic in life. And really, I believe we could even help the generation today, Gen Z, that is really struggling because they have a different perspective that the older generation doesn't understand. And it's really hard to have intergenerational teams and conversations. Like, we just need to do this for the better of everything. I just believe in the wedge of disagreement so much.
Lovely. And so I do hope that we can all get to that stage of being okay with disagreeing. You know, I've learned something that learn to say I agree.
Mm.
And it will avoid a lot of conflict. Just say you agree. And it's not agreeing necessarily with what the person might say, but to agree that that's the person's opinion.
Yeah. Are you agreeing or are you defaulting, right? Like that we could have a whole other podcast about that.
Definitely. So tell us, how do we get in touch with you and how do we get into your program, or what do you have out there?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share that. Yeah, so the wedgeofdisagreement.com, the website is up. The book comes out in September. It is available in pre-sale. And the Strategic Activation Coaching Program, the public program starts in June, July. We're in the works of that right now as we're going through the first cohort and having some really fun conversations and slow conversations too, because we're building upon a pretty powerful method. So everything is there. You know, any of the listeners can find me by my name as well on all the social media. Pretty easy to find me, but the book and this content specifically is at thewedgeofdisagreement.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna, so much for your time. And I think this is definitely a topic that everyone would want to know more, because everything you said is what is, people are struggling with in organization. We all are struggling with those challenges.
Yes,
And
thank you so much.
yeah, so appreciate your time, and we do welcome you back. We want to hear when this book launch, and what are some of the result you're getting with this book in organizations and share with us. But guys, do reach out, send your questions. Anna will answer, myself will help answer some of those questions. But share this broadcast to anyone that can benefit from this year and leave your comments. So take care and thank you for joining East Meets West. Anna, thank you again for your time and look
Thank you.
forward to all the success that you're going to be having.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Okay.